Hello, I'm Greg Harchis, Superintendent for the Appleton Area School District. Thanks for joining me for our second video in our series of videos that will provide information to families in the community about our November 8th referendum. This video is going to focus on what a referendum actually is, what does that mean to say we're going to referendum, and then why are we going to a referendum. So all referendums start with finances. That's what they're about. It basically means that a district doesn't have the finances they need to meet the needs of their students in the way that they believe they need to. So this is a graph, just shows what our budget was approximately last year, rounded to the million. So it's $220 million roughly was our budget last year. And that's the revenue that we received from the federal government at about 21 million, and then state and local. And so the federal government, that revenue is very specific in how we can spend it. Primarily, it goes to reimburse us for the meals we provide for students that qualify for free or reduced meals, or it's specific to programs. So it might go for a specific special ed program or a Title I program. So again, that's very specified by the federal government. Then we have our state, which gives us the largest portion of our funding at 126 million, and our local at 73 million. Most of that local is property taxes. Well, the state and the local dollars are tied together under a revenue limit, and I mentioned that briefly in the last video. So the state in 1993, the legislature passed a law that created a revenue limit for all school districts. And what we look for each year is that that revenue limit increases. If that happens, that means we're going to have more funding for our schools. But what happens in many years is that the revenue limit doesn't increase. The state might aid us with more revenue, and so that means that their portion may change. It may increase, but that just means that the green part, the local, goes down a little bit. Or sometimes the state might reduce what they're giving us for aid, and that means that more then comes from the property taxes. But unless the state increases the revenue limit, this circle doesn't get any larger. And so that's currently the scenario we are in. And so last year, we had the same revenue as the previous year, and again this year. So for 3 years in a row, we're going to have the same amount of revenue, and that poses some challenges for us as our operational expenses, which are impacted by inflation, go up every year. And so the solution to that the state provides school districts is we can go out and ask our community and our families to provide more revenue through a referendum. And that would mean that that portion that you see here in green, the local, would increase, but it's up to taxpayers to make that decision. So a little bit more about what a referendum is. Some specific information here is it's a voter-approved resolution authorizing a school district to exceed the state-imposed revenue limit, which is what I just explained. And the Board of Education has to make the decision to put a referendum, one question or two questions on the ballot, and that's what our board did. They voted in August to put 2 questions on our November 8th ballot. One of those questions will be capital, and that means we're going to use those dollars for projects across our district, buildings that we want to renovate, add on to, or construct completely from new. And then the other question would be operational, and that's ongoing money that we would get every year to help our district function. So that's what a referendum is. Now for us, why we're looking at a referendum, there's several reasons, and they're tied to how our enrollment has changed and grown in different areas of our district, and then just the age of our facilities. So the first one here I say is concerns about enrollment growth on the north side of our district. So in our last video, I talked about how we have a lot of growth in the northeast part of our district, and we don't have an elementary school in that area. So because of capacity issues at the other schools that are on the north part of our district, that's Ferber and Houdini, it's not like we can move Huntley students over to those 2 schools because they're already at capacity, and Huntley is significantly over capacity. So we feel the solution for this is to build a new elementary school. And so these are some challenges that we started to look at in 2016 already. So it's been 6 years of us kind of wrestling with this challenge and trying to figure out what we can do different. The next bullet point says capital project budget of 2.5 million is spent on facility needs and not educational needs. And what we mean by that is this 2.5 million, this is part of the 2014 referendum where we had an operating question where we asked the community to raise their taxes just a little bit so that we could fund projects every year. And so we use this $2.5 million for putting new roofs on our schools, new boilers installed, new windows, improvements to parking lots, flooring. So it's those facility needs that keep our facilities, our schools functional, but they're not necessarily the educational needs. For example, we would like to turn our middle school, they have traditional industrial arts classrooms, like a woods classroom, into more of a STEM space. And something like that at each school might be in the range of $400,000 to $500,000. We would never be able to afford that out of this $2.5 million. Another project we would like to take on is we have 2 elementary schools that have not had their office moved out to the front of the school, which is how schools need to function for safety and security purposes. You lock down your school and all access has to then come through the office. So a project like that, we've done that with 2014 referendum dollars across most of our schools, but we have a few schools that we still need to do this for, a couple of elementary schools and middle schools. Those are about $1.5 million projects. So again, never would we be able to afford that out of our yearly capital project budget. And then the next 2 bullet points really tie together. It's just the age of our schools. 22 of our 27 schools are over 50 years old. The average age of our schools is 66 years. And how we educated students in some of our buildings, like a Wilson and Kaleidoscope 95 years ago, is just different than we do now. And so it's similar to having an old house. In an old house, you need to always make sure you have a roof that's functional. You have to have a furnace that works, and that's what we do with our schools. And we've done a really good job of keeping our schools functional. But at times you want to renovate, like a kitchen, and make it more modern. And that's what we need to do in several of our schools. And I'll give you more detail in future videos about these type of projects. So this would be the first question, and I'm not going to read through all of it. This is very legal. We have to work with an attorney on the wording, and then our board approves it, and then the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction for the state, has to approve it. And so that's why it is written as it is. Basically, what we're saying here is we're asking you as a taxpayer to approve a referendum of $129.8 million, and then it lists all the projects. But again, I'll share more information on these projects in a future video. And then the second question is the operational question. And so that's $5 million we would have every year going forward for some operations. And again, they're listed here, but I will share more in a future video. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. I appreciate your time, and please look for our next video coming out soon.